Story that came out of New York, I guess it was on Tuesday this week. The new mayor there, his name is Eric Adams, he announced a major push to remove people with severe untreated mental illness from the city streets and subways. And look, you don't have to have been to New York or spend any amount of time there. This is one of those regular things that comes up, like even on the late night shows, right? About how awful their subway system is, people falling asleep, people,
homeless people and people in distress.
It's just how it is in a city that large.
That large, for sure. People slip through the cracks. But I think what bothers me most about what I read about in this story is that this is for people who are not posing any threat to others necessarily. So they're a nuisance. Perhaps they're in the way, but they're not causing anyone any harm.
Yeah, and that's really a key part to the story, because that's where some people are weighing in saying, the spirit of what the mayor, and by the way, he ran on this, right, during the campaign to run for mayor, saying that he would clean up the streets. But then again, mayors have been saying that for the past, 100 years. But the fact of the matter is, as you just pointed out, these people don't necessarily have to be providing any kind of a violent background to have themselves picked up and removed. So as I started to say, the spirit of this, which is to help these people somehow, by giving them a place to sleep or getting them off the streets or not forcing them to sleep in some way, seems like the right approach.
Well-intentioned.
Exactly, but there's been a lot of backlash to it, and you could perhaps understand why. James Hughes is president and CEO of the Old Brewery Mission. He's on the line with us now. Mr. Hughes, thanks for the time this afternoon.
Thanks for having me, Aaron.
Yeah, I'll begin by just asking you, broad strokes, this story, as I said, yes, as Natasha mentioned, well-intentioned, the spirit of what he wants to do is right. Why is this, do you believe, not a good idea?
Well, I think it is a complex issue. There's no question, but I get the feeling there's almost another agenda at play, this idea that homeless people are necessarily people with mental illness. They are a problem. They need to be cleared out, and out of the way of people using the subway. Sounds like the real agenda here. And to actually help people who have mental health issues, who are in distress, maybe even have a medical emergency related to their condition. Do they need help? Do they need help quickly? Do they need appropriate clinical care in a hospital setting? Absolutely. But what this article says is that we're going to send the police in and take people who are evidencing mental health problems to the hospital, just like that, just seems to be draconian and, a violation of rights, period.
And being taken against their will, right? I mean, I think that's the thing. And I'm sure this is something you've seen many times in your work, James. Some people don't necessarily want the help. They want to be left alone.
Absolutely. But people, right? Systems need to adapt to people. People not necessarily adapt to systems. And so you're absolutely right. We hear about a lot of people with mental health issues who are resistant to care. But how much do we need the system to adapt to them and not wait for them to fit into a box to be able to get care? And we all know that there's not enough mental health support. So access to it is a big issue. People who have severe mental illness, who are in the subways of the New York City system, are people who have been failed by their health system in the first place, and now the mayor is trying to sort it out by sending in police officers. It just doesn't sound like an answer to the question that really is before us, which is the amount of mental health care that is being provided in the first place.
I couldn't agree with you more. The mayor of New York City is saying that they have a moral obligation to help them. You're saying you see it as a human rights violation. I'm wondering what happens here in Montreal. How are these situations handled here right now, James?
So you might not have seen a lot of coverage of these kinds of incidents recently because, frankly, the system here is really quite developed. I'm really quite proud of how our systems in particular, our police and our other associated health systems have adapted to the phenomenon, as Aaron said, of growing homelessness. And there's a big overlap between mental illness and homelessness. We know that. Organizations like ours and others have developed mental health programs, even for people with serious mental illness. So when we can get people into these programs, it's called the PRISM here at the Old Brewery, and there's other PRISMs. The Welcome Hall runs a PRISM program, and there's other types of mental health programs. We're really good at getting people settled down and getting people on the road to housing. It really can work. But people who are in severe distress, who are in a state of mental health emergency, if the police are called, quite rightly, they will assess whether it is indeed a mental health emergency and call mental health experts. And we have a service here called UPS, so that's Urgence Psychosociale, and they will be the ones that come and try to use their skill sets, not coercive skill sets, although the police may be present just in case, to directly address the person who's in need. So, and there's other types of police programs available as well. So, I think it's really quite a developed way of going about this. And so maybe there's hope that in New York they'll take that approach in time as well, which is a more clinical approach to a medical emergency, and maybe have better results as a result.
As you mentioned, the program we have here, I don't know, but I'd not really heard that it was a big problem with people sleeping on the metro or anything like that in this city, certainly not compared to what it is in New York. But I think back a couple of weeks ago, James, to the situation with those people under the Ville Marie, where the city told them you have to move. And what happens every time this happens is them saying, well, I don't want to move. We don't have housing for them. They don't want to go to shelters. It's kind of a circular problem, is it not?
You got it. You absolutely right. Those small encampments that we see under the Ville Marie and elsewhere. They're popping up all over the place. That's a sign of a city with really severe housing crunch. There's no alternatives for them in the kind of affordable, dignified, low cost housing that they all want and deserve. And so there they are, hanging out under the Ville Marie. And then people come down and say, get out. That's obviously nothing to do with mental illness. That has to do with construction or transport issues. But those folks are citizens of the city as well. They need to be supported in a kind and humane way. If they're going to be moved, get to know them, get to know where they want to go. And, God forbid, could we actually think about trying to help them get housing? That would be something I'd be really proud of us doing.
And how would that happen, James?
Well, there's cities. Cities like Houston, cities like Seattle, even cities like Toronto, they have streets to homes programs where we actually get specialized teams together and actually work with people living in the street, living in the encampments, to try to figure out what their housing needs are and actually help to get them directly into that housing with the supports they need to keep it. So, we've encouraged the city administration to think about ways to actually create these corridors directly from the street into appropriate housing. And we really think that the city is going to have more problems in terms of encampments in the future if we don't take a proactive approach like that.
Yeah, I should point out as well, we learned the hard way, given the last couple and a half years of the pandemic, that some of those people who ordinarily might be the people living in those encampments, that population has gotten bigger through no fault of their own, right? There were people hurt during the pandemic, people who lost jobs, people who simply could not work, did have no money, forced to live that way. And that's perhaps the most disturbing part of all of this.
Yeah, so you're so right. Homelessness is going up in our great city. It was going up before COVID already, but with COVID and the massive increase in rents, and with incomes not keeping up with it, most people, coped somehow, but, there's a percentage of people who didn't. And, they're finding themselves in the streets, finding themselves in the shelters in numbers we've never seen before. Tonight, there'll be at least 4,000 people that are living homeless in this city, in the shelters, in the subways, in the streets. And that's a bigger number than 2018. It's the minimum number. It's the number, we generally think scientifically that we're able to put our finger on, a quarter of which, by the way, 1,000 people will be living rough in absolute homelessness. And frankly, I think that's just too many for our city. We got to think about reversing that. And it takes massive investments in housing, creative investments in housing to do that. So, fingers crossed. We just saw a city budget yesterday. I think there's some really neat things in there that I think are very, very promising. And hopefully we can get in front of this at some point.
That thing you're talking about promising, I'm guessing that's the money set aside to buy property where the city's going to buy housing to hopefully be able to house these people?
Yeah, there's a number of measures in there that we've seen and we've been told about that really could be very helpful. Big numbers. As I said, the problem or the challenge, the need, if you will, is in the thousands in terms of homelessness. And right now, the investments being made by government are in the hundreds. Yeah. So we got to close that gap. We got to get into the thousands of units in time so that we can actually turn the corner.
I was just thinking, too, about how the face of homelessness has changed. I think we make assumptions about who homeless people are, and I think that there has to be a massive shift in terms of our general mentality towards homeless people.
That's a good point.
No question. That is such a key point, Natasha, because we have more and more people. We're circling back to the mental health issue. Just helping someone into their home is not enough. They're coming out of homelessness or they're at serious risk of homelessness. We've got to make sure they can keep that home and not have to come back into the shelter system. And how do we do that? It's home support services. We've got to make sure we have people, counseling services that are adapted to the person, that are available all the time if necessary, so that those people can keep that kind of attachment to this new community they're creating. And it's our job to make sure that community support, if you will, is there so that we can, as we lower the numbers, we can keep them lower.
James Hughes, President and CEO of the Old Brewery Mission. James, thank you so much. Very much appreciate your time.
Thanks so much for having me.